Hello there, friends. As you know from reading the email that I sent out this morning, I hope I'm going to send it out this morning. Um, this morning being Tuesday, December 2nd. Um, Beginning soon after the first of the year, we're going to be embarking on a similar but somewhat different path in our Monday, Friday Dharma classes. We're going to follow a more traditional presentation of Buddhist teachings. Um, and one segment of those teachings, a big segment, is going to be a presentation of the 21 Lam Rim meditations. Lam Rim being a Tibetan word which means stages of the path, as in stages of the path to enlightenment. So, very much looking forward to that. Really, really excited. Um, as I also mentioned in the email, the text that we're going to be drawing from for the Lamrim teachings and meditations is the new meditation handbook by my main teacher, Geshe Kelsang, Tibetan Lama, who died a couple of years ago, or I guess I should say left his body a couple of years ago. Um, Inquiring minds in this age of the internet, it's completely understandable and encouraged to find out who the author of this book is. I mean, I can understand how people would wonder, you know, this book that we're going to be studying, Geshe Kelsang Gyatso, being the author, what are his qualifications? Who is this guy? Jeff refers to him as his teacher. I want to know more. Good on you. It's kind of what we do, kind of what our curious thinking mind does is dig deeper. Um, so if you do feel called to learn more about Geshe Kelsang Gyatso, um, you won't go very far on the internet before you learn about a disagreement, conflict between Geshe Kelsang and the Dalai Lama. So I want to just offer a little bit of background on that, on that conflict and that relationship. And toward the end, I'll provide you just my perspective, my brief perspective on the conflict. So before we get into the particulars of the disagreement slash conflict, I want to provide some definitions and context to help you have context for everything that transpired here. I've kind of introduced Geshe Kelsang Gyatso, a Tibetan Lama ordained at the age of 8 into a monastery in Lhasa, became a highly respected scholar and earned his Geshe degree, Geshe degree, which is the highest degree that one can receive in the Tibetan monasteries, in both kind of traditional worldly education, for lack of a better term, as well as teachings and practice in Buddha Dharma. The New Kadampa tradition, an organization that Geshe Kelsang founded, um, just a Buddhist, not just a Buddhist organization that gives people an opportunity to learn the teachings of Buddha and to practice those teachings in meditation. Worldwide organization, um, thousands of centers, literally thousands of centers all throughout the world. The Dalai Lama, the Dalai Lama is I just learned he just recently had his 90th birthday. He is the patron saint of the people of Tibet. Very, very beloved, very revered. Um, Interestingly, Geshe Kelsang and the Dalai Lama were trained in the same tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. There are four different schools of Tibetan Buddhism, one being the Gelug, Gelug tradition, also known as the Kadampa tradition. Kadampa, Gelugpa, those two terms are interchangeable. Both the Dalai Lama and Geshe Kelsang trained in the Gelug tradition. Um, a common misperception that people have about the Dalai Lama is that they oftentimes think that the Dalai Lama is to Buddhism as the Pope is to Catholicism, like the big boss of all of the religion. Not the case. Um, there are different leaders of the different of the four schools of Tibetan Buddhism. Dalai Lama, up until 6 or 7 years ago, was the political leader of Tibet. He assigned somebody else those political responsibilities, as I say, 6 or 7 years ago, and associated with the Gelug tradition because that's where he was trained, but he's not the head of the Gelug tradition. He's kind of not the Pope of Buddhism. Um, and he is very much beloved by the people of Tibet, a very beautiful practitioner of the teachings of Buddha, a very inspiring figure for both Tibetans and people throughout the world. The Dalai Lama won the Nobel Peace Prize years ago. So, very esteemed figure. So, finally, um, in this kind of longer than I had anticipated definitions and context setting, Dorje Shugden. Dorje Shugden is a Dharma protector, what's called a Dharma protector in Tibetan Buddhism. Dharma protectors are fully enlightened Buddhist deities who are regarded as being fully enlightened, who protect the Dharma, protect the teachings of the Buddha, protect practitioners of Buddha Dharma, um, protect their livelihood, their material resources, all other material resources, um, and most importantly, protect the realizations that Dharma protectors have, or excuse me, that Dharma practitioners have. They basically protect this is sort of my take on Dharma protectors is that ultimately Dharma protectors protect protect the realizations and the insights that practitioners have. They're kind of like protectors of the minds of Dharma practitioners, in addition to all the other forms of protection that I just described. So, Dorje Shugden, another name he's called by is Duldzen, Duldzin is how I think it's pronounced or spelled, but typically referred to as Dorje Shugden. So, before I get into any more of it, I want to say that when I first learned about the conflict between the Dalai Lama and Geshe Kelsang, I was disappointed to hear that. It was like, oh, geez, another political conflict, disagreement, bordering on regarded by some as being scandalous. I thought I had hoped that Buddhism was sort of immune from these sort of dramatic controversies. If that's the experience that you have or the feeling that you have in hearing about this conflict, please know I can totally relate to you and the feelings you're having. So, Sometime in the 90s, I believe it was about the mid 1990s, maybe the early 1990s. The Dalai Lama consulted an oracle, the state oracle of Tibet. And for those of you who don't know, an oracle is a person with mystical powers who is able to know what happened in the past. Even though he wasn't aware of what happened in the past, he's able to look back in the past and see things that aren't immediately visible. He can see into the future about things that are going to happen. He or she, I would assume. I've only heard of male oracles, but every reason to believe that there are female oracles as well. Um, to understand the state of the world and then give counsel to the person who has called a session with the oracle, to basically give advice to the person who has called the session. The Dalai Lama called a session with the state oracle of Tibet, and an outcome of that session was that the state oracle said that Dorje Shugden is in fact not an enlightened Buddha, a fully awakened Buddha. He is not a legitimate Dharma protector. He is in fact a malevolent spirit. And the state oracle advised the Dalai Lama to um, instruct his followers, which is basically all of the people of Tibet, and many people outside of the country of Tibet. The state oracle advised the Dalai Lama to encourage his or to direct his followers to discontinue the veneration and following of Dorje Shugden, to stop relying on Dorje Shugden and taking refuge in him as a Dharma protector. So, Geshe Kelsang did not take kindly to that, and others, it should be said. There are a lot of people were, I think, disappointed and saddened to hear of this request from the Dalai Lama, because Dharma protectors are, for many practitioners of Buddhism, very important figures. Um, when I think about this and reflect on this situation, um, I sort of think about myself, and I have come to rely very strongly on Dorje Shugden as my Dharma protector. And I've been relying on Dorje Shugden for only 27 years. I think about people who have been relying on him for 67 years and maybe even longer. And to be told by someone, especially a respected, very visible figure, that you got to stop relying on Dorje Shugden no more, and no more taking refuge in this Dharma protector, very difficult to hear and very unsettling. In it would be in my heart, and very unsettling to my overall Dharma practice. So, um, lots of people were upset to hear this, and by virtue of the Dalai Lama being so visible, so revered by so many, and so powerful, um, there were some practitioners of Dorje Shugden, that sort of adherents, if you will, of Dorje Shugden, who didn't feel comfortable about speaking out against this request. Um, they weren't happy about it, but you know, taking into consideration the person who made the request didn't really feel like they could state their upset about that. Geshe Kelsang, very powerful figure in Tibetan Buddhism. Again, the founder of the NKT, the spiritual director of the NKT, New Kadampa tradition, NKT. Um, um, Himself having many followers and himself having a great degree of power. Feels weird talking about power, sort of like influential power within the Buddhist world, but there you have it. Um, Geshe Kelsang sort of spoke out against the Dalai Lama and said, no, this isn't right. Um, um, and Geshe Kelsang used his resources, the resources of the New Kadampa tradition, to actually demonstrate against the Dalai Lama and his request in a very public way under the name of religious freedom. Um, I think you should also know that the whole Dorje Shugden controversy became very politicized. There were in Dharamsala in India, kind of where the Tibetan community lives in exile, having been extricated from Tibet by the Chinese in the 1950s. Um, it's kind of the Tibetan community in exile in Dharamsala, India. And there were business establishments who put notes on the door saying, Dorje Shugden practitioners not allowed in here. So, it was a very difficult situation, not limited just to, people who practice Dharma and have reliance on Dorje Shugden. Um, it had a real sort of like real time, real world effect too, in terms of being able to shop in certain establishments, um, and just being sort of like ostracized and marginalized by certain groups of people in the world. So, really, really difficult situation by virtue of Geshe Kelsang's speaking out against the Dalai Lama and or organizing these demonstrations. He became vilified by the majority of the Tibetan community. Um, you see, the Dalai Lama, the patron saint of the people of Tibet, seen by many as being a god, a god in a human form, being an emanation of Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion. For someone to speak out against the Dalai Lama is just inconceivable, inconceivable, and in the minds of people, just unforgivable and just unconscionable. So Geshe Kelsang was vilified very strongly for his views and attacked. You're going to read about this if you choose to research this, and you don't have to research this if you don't want to. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. I wouldn't blame you if you did want to look more into it. Um, but yeah, all sorts of accusations against Geshe Kelsang, statements that the New Kadampa tradition is a cult. You will read about questions and criticisms about only books being written by Geshe Kelsang Gyatso being allowed to be referenced during formal teachings within the New Kadampa tradition. Lots of questions and criticisms about that. I'm not going to attempt to address every single issue that has been brought against Geshe Kelsang and the New Kadampa tradition as a result of this conflict. That would, I fear, come across as being kind of defensive, maybe maybe get it feel like it would like degenerate into a tit for tat kind of discussion. Not interested in doing that. Two things that I want to say in closing. This has gone on, this sort of primer has gone on a bit longer than I had anticipated, but two things I want to tell you is that with regard to the conflict, this is my personal view. an important teaching in Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism in particular, um, an important teaching, maybe the most important teaching, is to rely on the instructions of your spiritual guide. Spiritual guide, guru, these terms are interchangeable. Perhaps the most important teaching is to rely on the instructions of one's spiritual guide. And the fact of the matter is that Geshe Kelsang's own spiritual guide, whose name is Trijang Rinpoche, taught Geshe Kelsang, as well as all of Trijang's other students, rely on Dorje Shugden, take practice in the Dharma protector Dorje Shugden, take refuge in the practice, rely on Dorje Shugden, make offerings to him, make praises and requests for the protection of Dorje Shugden. Do this. And Geshe Kelsang basically said the basis of his, I think, feeling compelled to speak out against the request of the Dalai Lama. Geshe Kelsang said, my spiritual guide, my guru instructed me to rely on Dorje Shugden practice. I am going to follow the instructions of my spiritual guide. I don't care who says. I don't care who says otherwise. He says, I don't care what the consequences are. You know, Geshe Kelsang has become a pariah in the world of Tibetan Buddhism. His reputation in the eyes of many just completely trashed. Um, been called a cult leader, called all sorts of other things, an enemy of the state of Tibet. He had his Geshe degree revoked. Geshe Kelsang says, I don't care. I'm following the instructions of my spiritual guide. My guru instructed me to rely on Dorje Shugden, the Dharma protector. I'm going to do this. So again, for me personally, it's a beautiful demonstration of the practice of perhaps the most important teaching in Buddhism. The other personal point that I'd like to offer to you is that I'm very grateful for my training in Kadampa Buddhism through the new Kadampa tradition. Um, I'm not actively involved with the NKT anymore, not as a result of this conflict, but just circumstantial. Yeah, just totally circumstantial. Um, and please know that I have great affection for the NKT, huge, huge appreciation in receiving the most important, most valuable gift in my human life. Most important, maybe second most important, the first being having a human life. Second most important, receiving training in the teachings of Buddha, which I received from the New Kadampa tradition, and my spiritual guide, Geshe Kelsang Gyatso. It's a beautiful presentation of the teachings of Buddha, the Lam Rim, the sutras, the tantras, and Geshe Kelsang's presentation of the teachings of Buddha. When one gets past all of the politics, all of the hurt feelings, all of the resentment, all of the vilification, it's a very beautiful, very clear, very inspiring, very reliable presentation of the teachings of Buddha. And we're going to be drawing on those teachings, again, beginning after the first of the year, through the new meditation handbook, which is an abridged presentation of the 21 Lam Rim meditations. So there you have it. That's all I'm going to say, all that I feel I need to say right now. And if you have any specific questions, any specific reservations, um, about anything relating to the disagreement slash conflict between Geshe Kelsang Gyatso and the Dalai Lama, please talk to me individually. We can get together for coffee. We can, exchange emails, whatever you want to do. I just want to clear the obstacles. I think my main objective here is to clear away the obstacles that might otherwise prevent you from deepening your relationship with these precious Dharma teachings. So, if you've listened this far, you're hearing these words, so you have listened all the way through this. Thank you. Thank you so much. Namaste. And I hope to see you soon.